Ladies and gentlemen, there are only two things that I love in life. Micro ATX and ridiculously powerful gaming PCs. Sorry, Thea. And today, I'm extremely excited to say that we're going to be combining the two, as MSI reached out to sponsor this video, and we're going to be creating something with their new Project Zero ecosystem, which essentially aims to take away as many cables as possible from your gaming PC rig. Of course, throughout this video, we're going to show you the ins and the outs of all of the different components, things we like, and maybe some things that could be improved. We'll show you how to put everything together with all of those cables, or I suppose in the case of this, the cables on the back that you can't see. And then when we're done, we'll be showing you the end result with those all-important gameplay benchmark numbers so you can see for yourself exactly how this thing performs. I think the best way to kick this off, rather than explaining to you what Project Zero actually is all about, it's going to be to actually show you. So, is this going to be a loud bag? Surprisingly not. But yes, this should perfectly illustrate what this is all about. So all of the connections that you usually have on the front of the motherboard that you can see through the glass panel are now on the back. And this means that you can plug them in theory, a little bit easier. It can get a little bit cramped depending on the case, but it's still kind of all in one place, which is nice. So you've got like your power connections for both like the CPU and the ATX. You've got your SATA, you've got your USB, literally everything pretty much is on the back. And in theory, it could be a little bit easier to plug in as well. I think it will depend on the chassis that you're using and how much room you actually have to cable manage everything. So this is going to vary depending on the case. But the case obviously is the other side of the equation because, and I'm putting this back very carefully because obviously the connections are now on the back, so I don't want to be as heavy-handed as I usually am. The other side of this is that you are definitely going to need a case that is compatible with Project Zero because these have special cutouts. This one being the brand new Corsair 2500. You can get this in an Airflow version like we have here, black or white. Or if you prefer, you can go for like a glass version that swaps this bit of mesh out for glass. I think going Micro ATX, I'd rather have the mesh on this, but if you go for the larger side version of this case, then there's enough airflow anyway. It doesn't really matter, to be honest, because you do also have this little airflow chamber here if you want to populate this with more fans and things. I'm literally popping things off, apparently. But the thing that I want to show you are these little cutouts here. So you might be forgiven for thinking these are just for cable management, but they're not. This is what actually allows the motherboard to sort of poke through to the other side. So once again, we'll show you these connections. When you plot this in, all of these will then line up on the back of the case. And then when you turn this round and pop the side piece off, you should then see obviously all of your connections are now going to go here. And I will say that in a dual chamber design case like this, I think it's going to be a lot easier because you've got way more room to sort of manage all of these cables because suddenly you've got a lot more cable all in one place. But obviously you are going to have to put your power supply here. So we'll be assessing how this goes throughout the video, but that's essentially the concept in a nutshell. It is going to cost you a slight price premium, but I've got to admit, I was pleasantly surprised to see that MSI aren't charging like crazy money for this. It's fairly accessible. If anything, the build process should be a little bit easier than normal. Just drop your motherboard down on top of the box, then you can start with your CPU. And I don't want to say this is controversial because it's not, but you pretty much got two choices really at this sort of price point. That being going for something like the Ryzen 7900 that we're using here today. This is a 12-core chip, and bizarrely enough, the price of this has come down so much since launch that this is, at the time of filming anyway, is slightly cheaper than the 8-core 7800X3D. And I think my cheat sheet way of looking at this is that this is going to be a better processor for multitasking and potentially a bit of longevity because it does have 4 more cores, but the raw gaming performance of this isn't as good as the 7800X3D, which is essentially the same price but does cost slightly more. So I'd say if you're playing at 1080p or 1440p, probably go for the 7800X3D, or if you maybe favor productivity, you use your PC for other things, or you're specifically playing at 4K resolution, then going for the 7900 probably makes a little bit more sense because this is stronger in other areas. But there's not necessarily a right or wrong CPU and GPU combination to go for, but if you do want to see the latest, best GPU and CPU combinations, I've already made that video in the top right corner of your screen that goes through everything in much greater detail. You'll then also need to be grabbing yourself a set of RAM or some memory, they're called the same thing, and I actually think this is going to be the perfect set for this because it's from G Skill. This is Trident Z5, but the color of this will perfectly match match the motherboard itself. And the GPU as well has a little bit of like silvery accents on it, so I'm sort of trying to tie everything together. This is a 32GB kit running at a 5600 MHz speed, but I'd probably advise people go for 6000 MHz as it's not actually that much more expensive and can give better results with Ryzen chips, but obviously it depends on the price at the time of checkout. It's very simple, just line up this little notch with the one that's on the motherboard and then give it a good push home until it clicks, which I still say is my favourite bit of the build because it's so satisfying. You then also want to grab yourself an SSD. This is a Seagate Firecuda 530, not the absolute cheapest drive out there by any stretch of the imagination, but again, price on this has come down quite a lot. You just want to remove the SSD cover, which is done with these 4 screws. Do be advised that you do need a slightly smaller screwdriver. Don't try and force like a big one to work because you end up stripping it and then you'll be very sad. But there you go, look, this whole plate just comes off and this is like one large heatsink. You do have these little plastic covers on here as well, so you do want to make sure that you remove the one for the SSD that you're using. It's very straightforward. There's only one right way of doing this. You just line this SSD up with this slot, then you push it down and you secure it with the screw before this goes back on top. And with that, I think we should pretty much be ready to rock and roll actually. And you can see the sort of theme coming along nicely here. Once we've got everything else in, I think it really is going to look the business. But I do want to check actually the mounting mechanism for our cooler. Obviously, if you're going for an air cooler, you'd put this on now. But we're going to do something a little bit different here today. Different in the sense that I've only just remembered this when I've started this build. But actually, where I've used this before, I can indeed verify that we don't need to change the AMD mounting mechanism because that's already ready to go on this cooler. But as I was trying to say, eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that I did actually put these in the first shot, but I've realized now it's going to be far easier and definitely match our theme to go with Corsair's new fans, the RX 120s. And I'm afraid I've got to say, as you will see a little bit later in the video, there is a flaw with these, and that is that the light on the side of the fan isn't diffused enough. I know, boo-hoo, first world problems, but these are cheaper than some of Corsair's other fans. These use the IQ Link cable-less, or at least minimized cable system, which is great, and it kind of goes with the whole ethos of Project Zero, which is why we're using them. But I do think that the more expensive QX fans definitely do look a lot better if that matters to you at all. We're going to remove our accessory box from the hard drive cage that I think does indeed come with some pretty cool easy fan mount screws. Sounds boring, but it's genuinely fantastic. Then it's just a case of picking up your motherboard and then lining this up with the huge hole at the back, and then this little standoff that catches the motherboard. Give it a wiggle till it kind of clicks into place, then use the screws provided with the case just to fit this down. With that done and out of the way, actually something I don't like about this case already is that when you hold it here, this bit doesn't feel massively strong. So I think when you are handling this, try and sort of grab it from the sides or the bottom, not this bar like you kind of instinctively would do, because it could bend. But small moment aside, I think it's now time to talk about cooling. So the best thing really about this case compared to its predecessor, what was that, the 280X? I used that myself and it was a hot box, I've got to be honest with you. As soon as you put anything in there that was high intensity, it wasn't ideal because the glass, well, it just wasn't ideal. You couldn't really get the airflow that you needed. I don't think it's going to be a problem with this whatsoever because you can breathe through the bottom, through the sides, through the front, and through the back. So we're going to do 3 fans at the top. We've got 2 at the front, and then 2 there, that's 7. And that happens to be how many fans I was sent. So it checks out. And as I remove these RX fans from the box, I would like to reiterate that we're not swapping these out from like a performance point of view. The MSI fans are absolutely fine. I mean, I've had no issues with them. It's just because if we were going to sort of populate these 7 fan slots, not only would we have to mix and match and then everything wouldn't sync together if we used some of these, but if we were to use 7 normal ARGB fans, that's a total of 14 cables. That doesn't really check out to me, which is why we're going for these IQ Link fans. But getting these fans installed is ridiculously straightforward because you have these little interconnects that kind of hold the 2 together. So just line them up like that, and then this can just sit on top of your radiator like this. But of course I do need the screws that come with the radiator, as these are longer and the ones to fit to a case are much shorter. So let's get this fitted down. But once you are ready, it should just be a case of lining this up, grabbing your radiator screws, and then fitting this into place. Then you want to lay your case down flat once again, grab some thermal compound and just gently put a little knob in the middle It is better to do a little bit too much than not enough, but to be honest, I think people overthink it a lot. It's really not too bad. But regardless, just grab your pump head and then lay this over the top of the mount. Then you can just screw it into place, kind of doing a bit of even pressure really from the top to the bottom, just so it doesn't ping out everywhere. And then it kind of self-centers, I guess, if you like, and you can flex the tubes a little bit to get a slightly neater look. But having said that, I do now realize that I've got to plug this cable into the fan block, and I don't actually have that much space. It is a right angle though, so wish me luck. I think we're in. We're in! There was no problem at all! So let's neaten this cable up by feeding it through the top of the motherboard chassis hole cable tidy thing. And then you'll be left with just this one cable that will do your RGB and your fan speed for all 3 fans over one cable, which is pretty cool. And you plug it into this system hub, the IQ Link system hub, I think it's called. And you can do loads and loads of different devices. Editor Carl, how many devices can you put on a single hub? Thank you very much, Carl. And I'm hoping that Corsair have been clever here and are actually going to allow me to put this here. So when I get the side panel, this isn't going to interfere. Imagine if they hadn't done that. That'd be so dumb. But no, there you go. So that's got its own perfect home. And rather than having all of these cables and different bits and bobs that really do take up loads and loads of space and can create awful cable management messes, you literally just got this. Obviously, you will need to provide it some power, and do be aware this is PCIe, not SATA power, because in theory you can connect loads of different devices, and again, it's just one cable. And somewhere here, you will also need to plug this into a USB 2.0 header on your motherboard to get everything synced up so it actually talks to your PC. So let's proceed to actually do that now. And this is going to plug in somewhere. Yes, down here at the bottom. Then I think it's time to tackle this large bundle of cables to get the case hooked up itself. But this is exactly the same as a normal motherboard, other than the connections, as I say, are on the back. And I think they're in the same sort of places as well. So HD audio is down here. Then we've got our USB-C, which again is exactly where you would expect it to be, sort of just below the ATX power. USB 3 is just below that. Then go even further down and you'll be greeted with your front panel connection, which on this board says JFP1. We now just need to populate the rest of the fans, and I will do this by removing the front panel. Everything on this actually comes off completely toollessly. Really nice, easy to use. I'd prefer if there was like a sliding like radiator bracket or something like you had on the Be Quiet cases, but being very nitpicky, so far it's actually been very straightforward to build in. So let's click these together, whack them on the front as an intake, screw these down into position. You also want to do the same with these side fans, but I would advise using these as an intake rather than an exhaust to give your graphics card a little bit more airflow. And then annoyingly, the issue I've got now is that we don't actually have a long enough cable to run from these front fans to these fans and then back to the hub itself. We've got plenty of these small ones, but obviously that's not really ideal. Corsair should give you longer ones, but they don't. But I'm going to see if I can make this work by moving this. So I can use a small one that then pulls through under here. And this is all the length we've got. I mean, I can cheat and go grab a cable from storage, but I mean, maybe all of this can sit at the bottom. Yeah, that'll work. Still out of sight, out of mind, sorted. I realise as well actually at this point that we haven't actually plugged the pump for the radiator in. So we've got the RGB and then this little fan header to control the speed of it. So we'll plug this in to CPU fan 1, and then the addressable RGB, there's one down the bottom, but this cable is not going to reach. I was going to say maybe it's behind the hard drive cage, but it is! It is! Okay, that was still worth it. Loud bang aside. There you go, that plugs in at the top. And if all goes to plan, this can still sit on top. Yep! I think it can actually, so no crisis after all. Worst case would have been an extra cable, but I mean it does. I mean, I understand why Corsair don't give you like a gazillion cables in the box, but honestly, I think it would be far easier just to charge people like £5 more. I know they're already really expensive, but then give you a load of different cables in the box rather than relying on you buying these like expensive box of cables that you don't know you need until you actually get to building and then you get upset. Yeah. And I now think that actually concludes our cooling section. Took a while longer than usual, but to be fair, I don't hate radiators today because This was okay, it was just the quantity of fans. Now's the exciting bit though. We're going to move on to our graphics card. This is from MSI. It is one of the brand new super cards from NVIDIA, RTX 4070 Ti Super. This is probably the card I would personally buy if I was going to go for a new computer, because I like to play at 4K resolution, but I'm happy to use DLSS at like performance settings. I do want ray tracing, but if I have to turn it down a little bit, it's not the end of the world. And I'm happy to spend a fair bit of money on a card, because these things are still not cheap, but compared to something like a 4080 Super or a 4090, these represent, I wouldn't say a bargain, but you're getting much better value for money. This is the Ventus 3X version of the MSI cards. We will be doing a VBios update a little bit later to show you how easy that was, because if you buy one of the first cards that came out, you can actually get an extra, is it like 5-6% performance? Don't quote me on that, but you can get extra performance with a VBios update. But fundamentally, this also does come with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, which I think is the perfect amount for gaming right now and for the foreseeable future. Getting it installed is of course incredibly straightforward. You just need to take these PCIe slot covers out for the appropriate slot. So because this is micro ATX, there's only 4 of them, and we only need 2 from this particular GPU. Well, we'll then just grab the GPU, we will line it up with the slot and the back of the case. Once your card is in, just give it a little bit of support with your finger before securing it down with the 2 screws that you previously removed. And then once you've done that, I think there's just one more component to go, the power supply. And this is one of the newer MSI ones. It's the A850GL PCIe 5. PCI Gen 5, of course, allows you to actually use one of these new NVIDIA cards that have this 12 or 16 pin connection without the use of an adapter. So it's going to be a lot cleaner. Oh, and it is! It is! I've been waiting for this power supply for ages, actually, because I don't normally get this excited by a colour, but yellow here is actually really important, because a lot of people are a little bit nervous about Gen 5 connections, but you don't need to be as long as it's plugged in properly. And by having these yellow connections on the cable, you can actually see when it's fully inserted, because if it's not plugged in all of the way, you'll be able to see a little bit of yellow like that, so you know that's bad. Whereas if it's pushed in all of the way, doesn't matter how much you tug on it, you cannot see the yellow anymore. That's a really cool safety feature, and I really like that MSI. Now, because this is a dual chamber design, it should be easy enough to actually get this power supply in there. I did a bit of a boo-boo and thought you would just place it in, but no, alas, you do have to take this mount out from behind. Surely this is not an an SFX rig. That would be bizarre. No, I don't buy that. Maybe you literally just have to plop this in. Yeah, I think actually that was a SFX bracket. Okay, that makes more sense. Relief then. I was like, surely not. This case is huge. No, if you want to use a SFX power supply, that looks like it's in a little adapter, but you don't need that if you're going for a standard ATX. So instead, just get this screwed into position. And then as suspected, it is now starting to get a little bit messy, and I'm glad I have cable managed as I've gone. But our ATX connection is just here. The huge one, you can't miss it. Oh, CPU's up here, isn't it? So the hard drive cage is going to come out. This is like the 3rd time I've removed this now. But that be a lesson. If you want to go down like the Project Zero route in this case, then you can't have any normal hard drives. Maybe you could have one. You could probably feed it through, actually. Let's try that. We're only actually using one 8-pin for the CPU because it's a low wattage CPU. Okay, yes, you could probably have one if you really know what you're doing, maybe 2, but it's certainly not going to be easy. We also have our PCIe, look, just one 6-pin. Connects like that. Then you can feed the PCIe round to the other side. I will come around to the other side of the desk. And then this should be the last thing we need to do before this is fully complete. So here we grab our little yellow cable. We'll line that up. This is a 600 watt PCIe Gen 5 connection, by the way, so should be should be pretty future-proof. And there you go, that is now in. We can just tuck that away slightly. And then I think this is probably the neatest and tidiest build I've actually ever done. I mean, it's literally just this cable here that you can't see because it's black on black. And then everything else is indeed cableless, or at least it certainly seems that way. Obviously you could go for an air cooler and that would eliminate all cables entirely, but I mean, this isn't really a big deal, is it? And obviously because this is an all black case and design, you've got a couple of silver accents, but primarily you can make this whatever you want. You want a blue build, RGB. You want RGB, RGB. I'm excited to get this one turned on, actually. I think this is looking pretty darn tasty. And the cooling should be really good as well for a chassis that is, I wouldn't call it small because it's very wide, but certainly very short. And actually, how rude of me, I haven't properly discussed the cable management side of things. If you've done it, as I have, where you have been neat as you go, no issues whatsoever, despite its smaller size and the fact that you're plugging everything in round one side, actually. Yeah, if you're after a micro ATX chassis to build in, you don't mind spending a little bit extra money and you want to go for Project Zero, as few cables as possible, I think we've done a cracking job. But does it work? We've got ourselves a monitor, keyboard, mouse, and of course the PC-centric mouse mat. If you want your right way up mouse pad, get yours with the link down below. Limited quantity! I'm certainly not worried about it, but will the side panel go back on? Yes, of course, no issues whatsoever. Turn it on, and moment of truth. No, we don't have HDMI, that was close. That would be a classic Centric move, wouldn't it? But no, here we go, real moment of truth. We have fans spinning, but no lighting just yet. But there we are! Everything spins! Yes! But are we going to get a display? It certainly looks like it. Yes, that's the one! When you're ready, then proceed into the BIOS, load the XMP or AMD Expo profile for the memory you're using, which overclocks it to make sure you're getting its full rated speed. Any issues with it, clear the CMOS, restart it, and sort of go from there, really. If you're using different fans, then you can actually customize a fan profile here, but because we're using Corsair's IQ Link, we'll do this all in software. But otherwise, you will, of course, need to install Windows. This is very straightforward if you haven't done it before. Made a full video about this in the top right corner of your screen that will walk you through the full details. But I think it's time to get gaming, don't you? And through the magic that is editing, we are all set up and ready to go. And I will say, we had a little bit of an annoying occurrence where I had to swap out the RAM because even though it worked once, XMP on that previous 5600 MHz Intel XMP kit, for the first time ever, I've used it loads of times, was actually throwing some issues. And I tried updating the BIOS, didn't fix it, which is exactly why I'd always recommend you go for AMD Expo, if possible, when choosing RAM for AMD gaming PC. But we can do ourselves a little peel. Give that a 9 out of 10. That was pretty good. And actually, in terms of appearance, I really do love this case. It stands out, it's a little bit different. It sort of takes everything that was good about the previous generation and just makes it a whole lot better. I mean, I know I sound like a broken record here, but seriously, if you're gonna put this on your desk, I would highly advise at the very least you measure to make sure it is gonna actually fit, or to be honest, just go for something taller, because it is going to eat into desk space, and especially if you have like a big monitor, maybe speakers and things, you'd be surprised how quickly that space does disappear. But I think it's a really nice blend actually of performance, airflow, accommodating for larger sized graphics cards. It's a nice modern chassis, but obviously you are going to have to pay a pretty penny really to get hold of this chassis, plus you will have to add your own fans. Those are the main downsides really. Everything else I would say I'm a fan of, but let's see how it performs. And as this is a new chassis, I think we should start with a new game. This is the latest Horizon, and true story, I've played maybe like 6 hours or so over on the PS5, and I never actually got around to finishing it. So this is good for me because I can start it up again. I've got an excuse to play it on PC and obviously get a higher frame rate, better visuals and things. This also has NVIDIA DLSS frame generation and DLSS as well, which is great if you're rocking an NVIDIA PC. And as you can see, this is running it really rather well. This is currently set to 4K, very high preset, and we have DLSS set to quality. So if anything, you could actually turn the settings down a little bit on that DLSS and get an even higher frame rate. But this is giving you pretty much everything you'd want, really. It's a fantastic looking game, and I can't wait to actually resume my journey as Aloy, even if she is pretty annoying in this. And I realise actually I've jumped the gun a little bit here, because I was going to show you how to flash the VBios on your MSI card, in case you have one of the early ones like we have here, of that super range where we can get more performance from. So we just type the name into Google, product page comes up, go over to this thing that says BIOS, hit download, make sure that your NVIDIA drivers are properly installed, by the way, in order to get this to run smoothly. Hit extract, do make sure that you've got the exact right card, by the way. If you've got the OC version, make sure you're on the OC page, etc, etc. As long as the model name exactly matches what it says on the box, you should be good to go. Then you just run this little application. Screen will go black, but it's just flashing it. Don't worry, all is well. And that's that. Probably should restart just to make sure that it has taken hold. But when you think updating your drivers or your CPU BIOS takes like 5 minutes, that was 5 seconds? Oh, Windows Update, no! Why is it always at the bad time? Running at the full rated speed then, here we are once again in Horizon, but now we actually have some proper gameplay. It's actually running rather smoothly, and you've got to admit, this is an absolutely stunning looking game. I mean, it looked fantastic on the PlayStation, and let's be honest, it still does. Nothing's happened to that version, but to be able to play it at even higher fidelity, higher settings, and higher resolution as well, because you've not got to rely on upscaling if you don't want to go down that route. Clearly the PC version is going to be the best way to play, and if you do want to plug in like a DualSense controller as well over USB, you can still get all like the PS5 controller benefits as well. I still think that doesn't work over wireless though. Let me know if that's changed, but last time I tried a DualSense controller with a PC, you didn't have that full DualSense capability, which is a little bit annoying, so I just use an Xbox controller. But yeah, this is a game that looks stunning and certainly seems to be running very well as well. Pressing swiftly on to our next title, and one that I realise is also an old PlayStation exclusive. Funny how things change. We have some Returnal. Now, I've never tested this game before. It's
new to the channel.
The joke, if you are new to the channel, is that I test it all the time. But that's because it's a game that does tend to run very smoothly and also has some pretty awesome ray tracing implementations in the game itself. So this is actually running at the highest possible quality preset. So this is very high with ray tracing also set to the max. We are running 4K. We've got DLSS set to quality once again. And as you can see, we're currently getting actually a very similar frame rate to that we were in Horizon. Not sure if this is going to be a trend through all of our games, but obviously with our ray tracing implementation, in theory, this could well be an even better looking game. I guess it depends how much you value ray tracing over like other visual fidelity things. Like Horizon's probably got like a longer draw distance and more stuff going on. And once again, if you haven't played this game, highly recommend it. It is a feast for the eyes, for the ears, and okay, probably not the nose. If the PC like blew up, it would be a treat for the nose, but I wouldn't call that a treat. That would just be a solid disappointment. Moving away from our PlayStation games though, and one that's definitely a whole lot more Xbox and PC, we have some Starfield. And yes, I know you've seen this sequence quite a few times now. I need to move on to a different part of the game. Okay, I get it. It's time, all right? It's time. I can't just sit around and play games all day as much as I would like. Anyway, once again, frame rate actually very similar. It's slightly lower, which I always find interesting with Starfield. Clearly, again, there's loads of stuff going on. It's just not in the ray tracing department. And we're getting around about 62, 64 frames a second. Generally speaking, it is pretty smooth. We had a slight spike there, but that's the first one I've seen so far. And this is pretty much a good indication really of the capability of this rig and why I say I would go for this graphics card if it was me buying for myself. And that is just because it's so flexible. I mean, not everyone has to have like the RTX 4090 or the 7900 XTX that can like run everything at max detail 4K. People want to save a bit of money but still be able to do everything. And this is pretty much that card, because as long as you are happy to run at 60, 70, 80 frames a second at 4K rather than like 100 frames a second, you're not really going to have to like trade much in, so to speak. It's still far better than you're going to get on console. This is running with DLSS set to quality. You can actually turn frame generation on as well if you do want to boost your frame rate further. So we'll turn this on, and you can now see that our frame rate has increased to around about 87 frames a second or so. And the latency actually that we have on this card, while we don't have it on screen because we're using MSI Afterburner rather than FrameView, it's not noticeable, to be honest. I mean, that's what it's all about, really. Does it feel like your character's lagging? I mean, there's definitely a slight latency penalty by turning it on, but you are getting a smoother image as a result. And as it's a single player game, this is going to be a great way to play. So it's nice to have the flexibility. Again, really well sort of paired rig for high-end PC gaming. But let's be honest, it doesn't matter how many games we test, there's only one that you guys care about more than anything else. Some Call of Duty Warzone. And as with all of the other tests so far, what you're seeing here is 4K resolution with DLSS set to quality. We've gone for the extreme preset here, and we're getting a much higher frame rate than we were on all of the other games actually. Once again, have your cake and eat it from a system that does cost a lot of money, but doesn't cost anything that I would call the crazy money territory. And as we're moving across, the frame rate has dropped ever so slightly. It is going to depend where and when you are in a title. Obviously, you are always going to get some variance, but if you have a look at that frame time graph on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see it's actually really, really smooth. I'm very impressed actually. I wasn't actually sure we were going to get this level of frame rate, especially bearing in mind this is at 4K resolution.
Oh, it's using DLSS. It's not real 4K.
It does not matter if you can't notice a difference, and if you can notice a difference, you can just turn it off. This also is a good indication as well of CPU bottlenecking, because we're not actually getting any at the moment, and this is exactly why I say if you are going to be playing at 4K resolution, then maybe going for that 12-core CPU is actually going to be the best way to go, because you get the extra 4 cores, but you're not having to run into problems limited by your CPU. But if you are going to drop down to 1440p, as we do in just a second, then that's when you might start to see better performance in certain titles. But it depends what you play and what you're going to use your PC for, essentially. But as promised, here we have 1440p, and we can do the grand reveal together. What are we getting? A lot higher, actually, around about 180 frames a second, 190. So if you did want to go for like 1440p, 240 FPS, then this is also going to be a great system to do that. And interestingly enough, once again, it doesn't look like we're getting any bottlenecking from that CPU, which is nice. If you look at the GPU 2 utilization, you can see we're currently sitting at around about, it dropped there, but around about 95%. I would still go for the 7800X 3D if I was doing like a pure gaming PC, because I think it just makes sense on pretty much all cases, really. But there's not necessarily, as I say, a right or wrong way of doing it, right or wrong answer. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Ah! I don't know, I pressed E and I started holding something. I don't know what that was. I just wanted to go up and out.
But oh no, didn't work like that.
Anyway, last thing I think we need to do before we wrap this up is actually do our noise test and look at our thermals. 62 degrees on the GPU and about 65 degrees on the CPU, and this is your noise. So basically among some of the quietest systems that I've ever built, these fans are actually really good when it comes to performance, and as long as you've tuned them properly, which is very, very easy with the iCUE software, I think you're going to have a very good time with this. But the question very much goes out to you on this. What do you make of our rig? What do you make of our GPU, the Project Zero? Personally speaking, I think the amount of money people spend on custom cables and things, clearly this makes a whole bunch of sense. You won't need to go for the custom cables in the first place. But as I say, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this, so let us know down in the comment section below. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this, get yourself subscribed, and if you do want to check out current pricing on anything that was featured in this video, you can find it listed down below with our affiliate links. But thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.